Here is my speaking outline. Your land is dead. Your crops have withered away into dust, and your wells have all run dry. These are not verses from an apocalyptic novel, but rather a sight many American farmers have come to know. But by listening to my speech today, you might be able to help those farmers and keep the food you love on the table. Overuse and slow replenishment as a result of climate change have caused portions of our nation's groundwater supply to dwindle, threatening the livelihoods of both farmers and civilians. Today, I'm going to be explaining the reasons why our groundwater has been depleted, highlight the current problems that it is causing, and emphasizing the catastrophes that are in store if we cannot solve this problem. Now that I've given you the overview of what I'm going to be speaking about, let's begin with what caused this depletion. This depletion is a result from overuse, dry and hot conditions from climate change, and poor management. Firstly, in a Texas Tribune article by Jamie Lozano Carver, she found that water was being pumped in some regions of Texas from the ground 10 times faster than it can be refilled naturally by rain or snow. This is an irresponsibly high rate of pumping, and if it continues, groundwater depletion will be inevitable. Secondly, along with this, Mrs. Carver points out that climate change has increased temperatures and increased the rates and frequencies of heat waves and droughts. Now, these hotter, drier conditions mean that more irrigation is required to keep up with agricultural production. And as this gets worse due to climate change, demand for groundwater will only increase. Now, third and finally, our aquifers are being poorly managed. The Ogallala Aquifer is an aquifer in the Great Plains that provides water, groundwater, to pretty much the entire Great Plains region. And in states like Kansas, it's extremely poorly managed. NPR's David Condos found that in Kansas, 40 to 50 years ago, groundwater rights were handed out in order to make irrigated farming flourish, and that it did. But as a result of this, because groundwater rights were handed out so liberally, this strained the Ogallala Aquifer to an unacceptable degree. Now that I've told you why our groundwater has been depleted, let me explain the problems that we are facing currently as a result of this. These adverse conditions have caused farmers to struggle to grow the crops that they normally do, and it has caused communities to have to scramble for water resources. In an interview with Dan Basie, president of an agriculture advisory firm, as reported by Ann Probert, the Midwest skated a near disaster this summer due to extreme conditions. Essentially, ground moisture was completely depleted in the Midwest region, and Basie explained that they were relying on only surface moisture, precipitation essentially, rain by rain, week by week, to keep crops afloat. And Basie ended by warning that although crops might be in okay condition now, a single small dry spell could spell disaster for the region, killing off massive amounts of crops and resulting in extreme losses. Now, it's not just farmers that are at risk here. It is population centers as well that are facing these near-disaster water problems. For example, Blanco, Texas, as reported on by ABC reporter Julia Jacobo, was just 24 hours away from running out of water entirely. Blanco, Texas was already struggling to fulfill its water needs due to low lake and river levels, as well as minimal precipitation. And compounded with this, a small pipe break, which was a routine occurrence according to the water company, was the straw that broke the camel's back, and they almost run out of water entirely. The holding tanks in the city dropped to a level that there was only 1 day of water left, which was a near huge disaster. Now, we can see from this that scarce water is already a headache for both farmers and metro populations. Now that I've explained the problems we're facing now, let me go into the potential catastrophic problems that we'll be facing in the future. Much of our nation's groundwater supply is feared to run out entirely, which will result in catastrophic losses and community crisis. In a different article by David Condos, he found that western Kansas was close to depleting certain sections to their access to the Ogallala Aquifer, which would heavily disrupt agriculture and pretty much end civilian life. Condos found that Condos writes that the Kansas Aquifer was essential for many aspects of life in Kansas and other plains states. It props up Kansas's multi-billion-dollar agricultural economy, and it fills up cups for citizens at the kitchen sink. With such a reliance on this aquifer in both the rural and the metro areas, exhaustion of this water source would essentially mean the end of civilization as we know it in Kansas, because it would make life impossible, because water is essential for life there. Now, the Ogallala running out is not just isolated to farmers, and it's not just isolated to the Great Plains region either, but the entire population of the United States and the national economy are at risk. This is because, going back to the Texas Tribune article by Mrs. Lozano, she found that 30% of irrigated agriculture would have no source if the Ogallala were to run out. Now, this is huge because that agriculture is a large sector of the United States economy. And along with this, 82% of those who live within the boundaries of the aquifer rely on that water for drinking water, and those people would be displaced. Now I will move on to my conclusion now that I have explained the future problems that we'll face. In conclusion, I would like to stress that the catastrophic changes that I've described are inevitable if no solution is found. And I would also like to stress that these aquifers and groundwater sources are not completely empty. There is still time. Now, overuse and slowed replenishment as a result of climate change have caused parts of our nation's water supply to dwindle, which threatens the lives of farmers and civilians. Now, those dead crops and dry wells, for now, are isolated incidents. But in the future, there will be a freshwater famine for the plains if something is not done. And all I have to say is, when the plains runs out of water, will you be safe?